Greetings everybody, Sweet Beats here with Sweet Beats Tech Stop. We're taking a look at a Tascam 688 today that has a semi-common problem. I think it needs a new capstan belt. So we're going to look at a couple of things today. One being how to open up a Tascam 688, and then we're going to check and see if I'm right about the capstan belt. When we turn it on, we can hear a motor humming, but the capstan shaft is not spinning, and the transport fast forwards just fine, rewinds just fine, but when we go to put it into play, the head block assembly advances, but then it retracts again because the tape doesn't get driven. We get a little movement here because we have take-up tension that would normally be happening if the tape is moving, but the servo system recognizes that the tape's not moving and it says, oh, we're gonna pull back and quit. So let's take a look at how to open it up. There's really two stages to this. We have what Tascam calls the right escutcheon assembly. That's this section here that's over the transport and has the transport controls, the auto locate, the routing controls, all of that. So everything to the right of this line is the right escutcheon. Everything to the left is the left escutcheon, and you don't have to open it all up. If you just need to deal with a transport issue like capstan belt, you only need to take the right part off. If you want to get into the whole meal deal, then you can take both off. So our very first step is to shut the machine off and unplug it. And even though it's unplugged and shut down, there are still capacitors in the power supply that may hold a charge for a long time. And it is important to remember that milliamps can kill. And this is a good time for me to mention the disclaimer that I'm not responsible for anything that happens to you or happens to your gear if you choose to service your own gear and open up your 688. Proceed at your own risk, but do take caution to protect yourself and protect your gear. The other thing this is a good time to mention is if you don't have a service manual, get a service manual. It has all the information you need in it to either have somebody be able to help you or for you to be able to learn and help yourself. So I picked up a digital download service manual and printed it up. Got it from servicemanuals.net. I've used them for several things, and so I'll just offer them a free plug. Their service has been great. They have a wide variety of manuals. This was $20 to get the service manual, and they send it to you in a high quality PDF that you can print or just keep it electronically. So anyway, very satisfied with them, but do yourself a favor and get that. Now, that being said, I will say that the steps in the service manual for opening the 688 are very well laid out, but I am deviating from them. The manual says to remove the side panels first and then remove the armrest. And I find that it's really difficult to remove the side panels if you don't first remove the armrest. So the armrest, there are 5 screws underneath, and I'll tip this up and show you. Do not remove the screws, you simply need to loosen them. So let's get this tipped up so you can see these screws. Okay, we're looking at the underside of the 688. This is the front edge of the armrest. And there are 5 screws. There's one right here, and then there's a hole. You'll need a little bit of a longer screwdriver to get up to that one. And then there's one in the center. And then there's another one in a recessed hole, and then finally the one on the far left here. Again, don't remove the screws, simply loosen them. I don't know if you can see, but the holes and the armrest are slotted, and the tabs that are behind here are slotted, everything's slotted. So once you loosen these screws, the armrest simply slides off. And then once that's off, and you'll understand why I chose to remove this first, there are these tabs. This screw holds this L-shaped tab or bracket on there. This is what holds it to the chassis, and then this is a screw that locates it. If you undo, remove this screw, once that screw is free, and you can loosen this one, then you can swing this tab out of the way. Actually, what I would suggest, again, there are two screws that hold each side panel on. One here toward the back and one in the middle. So next step is to remove those screws. Again, set of 2 screws on each side. And once those screws are free, then the side panel can come off as long as this bracket is swung out of the way. Then it just drops down and away. Can you see there are 3 of these tabs? So once the screws are out and once this tab on the front is swung out of the way, each side panel just drops down and lifts away. And you can see there are the holes in the side. One here, and one back here. So take the armrest off, loosen the 2 screws on each, remove the 2 screws on each side panel, remove the locating screw and loosen the fastening screw on these little tabs, and then they can swing out of the way and side panels are off. So here we go. We've got our 688 with our armrest, wrist rest removed, and our 2 side panels. Another little tip, whenever possible, when I'm disassembling something, once I've removed a part, if at all possible, I like to just loosely put the screws or whatever fastener back in place. That helps me keep track of what goes where. And when that's not possible, I like to use little Ziploc bags, and I don't care if I use 50 bags to keep parts separated, and to use a Sharpie and to label the bags with either the step or the specific part they hold or some sort of notes, breadcrumbs, so I can find my way back out. So, and you know, like my locating screws on these little locking tabs, I just loosely put those back in, keep track of what goes where. The next step is to pull this dress panel off the back, the jack panel, and there are a total of 7 screws that hold that on. There's one here, mine's missing, but there's one that goes there, and then there's this one here, and this one here. So there's those 3, there's an additional one here, and then there's 3 across the back. One on the right, one in the middle above the heat sink, and then one on the left. So we'll remove those screws and lift that panel away. Okay, we've got the rear dress panel removed, and I've put my screws loosely back in. Next, inside the cassette bay are 2 screws, one here, one here. We're going to remove those, and then we're also going to remove our pitch control knob and set that aside. And then once those are removed, there are 6 screws that hold the right escutcheon to the chassis. 3 across the front and 3 across the side. We're going to remove those, and then the right escutcheon is free of the chassis. So I've got our 6 screws out, right escutcheon screws. I've got my pitch control knob removed and the 2 screws in the cassette bay. Put them in a baggie that's labeled. And now the right escutcheon is free to lift away. Fold the meter bridge all the way back so that the back of the escutcheon can clear. And then it's simply a matter of gently tilting it to the right. As you do so, you can kind of look in there and see what wires are connected. But you can clearly see we can lift it up almost vertical without straining any wires. And if we wanted to lift it further, there's a couple of, we can remove this one, we could unplug this one. There's a ground wire that goes down to a screw down here. You can see that. Remove that one. Generally, I have found on this era of Tascam gear, they use different size plugs and or different colors. So it's fairly easy to keep track if you have to unplug a number of things, like for instance this harness here that goes down to the control board. You can see that cluster of plugs. Those each have different numbers of pins. Another good trick that I like to do is just take a picture of the way things looked before they were plugged in. It's so easy to take pictures with a phone or whatever you've got handy. So I am going to unplug a few things so I can kind of swing this away a little further and take a closer look under the transport assembly to see if I see a rotted belt or broken belt or something like that under there. Oh, and by the way, so far all of the screws that I have removed are all number 2 Phillips except for the 2 in the cassette bay. Those are number 1 Phillips. They use a smaller Phillips screwdriver. So just basic tools needed to get this far. So I'll correct myself. I didn't need to unplug a bunch of things. I just needed to unplug this one gray 3-pin connector, and then I was able to just gently kind of lift the right escutcheon assembly over the side of the chassis and set it on the work surface. And actually I've just got a shoe put up against it right now to hold it up. It sits there quite nicely. There's enough slack in the wires. By the way, page 4 of the manual refers to replacing the memory backup battery, and it is right here. Just slides out. It's a coin type battery, a CR2430. And the verdict is, I don't know if you can see in there, you can see the broken belt stuck to the capstan flywheel. So, new belt it is. That's the cause of the problem. So now for removing the left escutcheon, there are a total of 12 screws. The service manual is a little vague on this and misses a couple of the screws. So there's 1, 2, 3 screws along the right side. There's 1, 2, 3 screws along the front. And then along the left side we've got 1, 2, 3 more screws. And now back on the back jack panel, there is a screw here, and there's one here, and then you also need to pick up this one here. So 1, 2, and 3. And once you remove those, I don't know if you can tell, but these are just nylon pieces. Those are actually like hinges. So once you remove those 12 screws, then guess what? The whole thing just lifts right up. This white wire right here, that is for the headphone jack in front. If you're going to tip this back considerably far, you'll want to unplug it from the monitor PCB right there, and it just plugs in. you can just tip it back and use a stick or something to prop it if you want to hold it up. And then this metal plate right here, that's over the record play amplifier PCB, and there's just what looks like 6 screws holding that on. Remove those screws, you lift that off, and you have full access to that assembly. And that's it as far as getting into it, and assembly is the reverse of the disassembly. And that's how you open up your 688.